Welcome to TINAH Talks, where time is not a healer, but we believe that we will have the power to heal ourselves and take our mental well being into our own hands. This podcast is a byproduct of TINAH, the mental well being marketplace, and a community platform at timeisnotahealer.com, providing you with the best products for your self healing journey. Hit subscribe and follow us on socials if you want support on your mental well being journey. We're your hosts. I'm Kelsey, and this is Sophie. This episode is all about low mood and how we experience it and the things we can do to take care of ourselves in those moments.
Yeah, I think we wanted to talk a bit about low mood. In other terms, you might hear this referred to as depression. And there's obviously various different stages of that or how people experience it. So I think we wanted to talk about it from our personal experiences because we've both gone through long-term depression and short-term depression. Cassie, do you want to talk a bit about your personal experiences with depression and low mood?
Sure, yeah. So I've had experiences of major depressive episodes. And I've had chronic low mood suffering for a long time. When I was seeing a therapist, I like went back after a while. I had started having anxiety attacks and I was like crying all the time. And so I went back to therapy and she's like, yeah, she's like, you pretty much had low mood or moderate depression for years. And I was just coming into maybe a full major depressive episode. My I knew I was in a major depressive episode, being that like I also worked in the mental health field. I was aware of the signs and the symptoms, and I recognized that I was not myself and I was struggling to manage it on my own when being around people was no longer helpful. So oftentimes like going to work and being around my peers or my friends, that was a really nice distraction and that was helpful, but I was starting to have trouble keeping myself composed even when with others. Like I have to excuse myself to go to the bathroom to cry and things like that. And the full major depressive episode hit me after my dad had passed. It's actually been both of my I've had 3 now and 2 of which were after my each of my parents passed. Um and with my dad, I started after he passed, I actually started to have intrusive suicidal thoughts. So, very graphic thoughts of hurting myself, killing myself, that kind of thing. And I knew personally, I was like, I don't want to die. That's not what my interest is, but like that's just like where my mind would go. And they were very intrusive, like the definition of the word, right? Just would come into my mind, and I'd be like, well, I don't want to do that. Like, but I was feeling so low, and I just knew it was a problem when I could no longer manage being around other people and it was starting to affect other areas of my life. And so that's when I went to the doctor and I got on an antidepressant. So that was my first major depressive episode. My second one was when out of nowhere I became gluten and dairy intolerant. And if you guys aren't familiar, 90% of your serotonin, which is like your happy hormone, is produced in your gut. So if you're having major issues with your gut, it's going to cause major issues with your mood. And at the time, I had developed I'd gotten off of my antidepressant. I developed a lot of really healthy coping mechanisms. I was good with my sleep and my eating habits and exercise. I was very adamant about exercise to help with my mood. But no matter what I was doing, because it was still eating gluten and I was still eating dairy, and I didn't know that was like the culprit. And I just like couldn't get out of this funk. It was really, really hard. Again, another signal was when someone like I went out to dinner with someone who was a guy I dated for a while, and I cried at the table because I was like, "You're being so nice to me." And I was just like so low and I was out of it. I was like, "Oh, I'm in a depressive episode." So that was the second episode. The third episode was again after my mom passed, which actually was just recent. And I only recently just started coming out of that. It wasn't nearly as intense as the first two. I didn't have intrusive thoughts or anything like that, but very much so looking back on it, I can be like, yeah, it was grief induced depression, but like I don't remember things. My memory is very like a little bit off from that time period. I still did stuff, tripled my revenue in my business last year at the end of last year, and it was like all of end of last year that a lot of this was happening. It was mid to end last year. But yeah, so I mean, sometimes you just gotta go in your car and cry.
I definitely used to sit in my car and cry when I was having an experience with low mood.
Yeah,
Firstly, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's obviously, for a lot of people, this is still a very much stigmatized subject, or subject that is very difficult to speak about. And I think the reason obviously we run this podcast is because both of us feel quite comfortable with sharing our experiences, and we want to encourage other people because it can really help go
yeah,
through that healing process. So thank you for sharing that. And also,
yeah.
congratulations on doubling your revenue whilst you were going through that period, because that is very, very, very hard to do, even without mental health stuff going on in the background as well. So
And I think I didn't mean to bring it up, but it was like, I did all right, right? But like, I think it's key because in today's world, there's so many people who are high functioning that like you wouldn't even recognize that they're experiencing depressive symptoms or that they're having a hard time. It's in those like quiet moments alone, or when you excuse yourself to the bathroom, or you're in the car by yourself, that like just the world feels rushing. And then it's like, whoop, all right, now I got to put it back on and I got to go and
100%.
do the things to survive every day.
Definitely, definitely. And so my personal experience with low mood mainly came when I think I've spoken to it in different episodes, when I had quite a severe mental breakdown back in
Yeah.
2018. And I don't think I've had like long-term low mood or depression. I think it was quite isolated to that point in my life. The anxiety and other mental health challenges, yeah, they're a consistent feature in my life. But fortunately, the low mood element was a period of time, and I think, again, I've spoken to it before. It was triggered by a very difficult breakup that I went through that really wasn't a very nice experience. And immediately I lost myself completely. I definitely used to sit in my car and cry pretty much every day when I was going through my worst period of low mood. And I was diagnosed with moderate to severe depression at that period in time, and I'd say it lasted about 8 to 9 months. I remember it
Mm.
kind of kicked in around like July 2018, and I remember actually a specific moment where my friend said to me on it was the day after New Year's Day. She was
Mm.
like, "I think you're coming out of it," and I was like, "Oh, okay, you've noticed that
Thanks.
there's been a difference." But that was about six months after,
Yeah.
but probably not fully out of it for quite a period after. But I remember starting to come up out of a very dark period about 6 to 8 months after
Yeah.
it started. But yeah, the main things for me were, I lost any feeling of excitement, any feeling of happiness, any feeling of like being able to see the future, or like how I could navigate my life to get to where I wanted to be. Everything just felt pointless. I just felt like I don't know if it was numb. I can't really remember, because again, I lost a lot of my memory from that period of time as well. But it
Yeah.
just felt like nothing had a point. I was just like, everything felt a bit like there was nothing was worthwhile doing. And like I just I just felt like I'd had the life sucked out of me. I'd look in the mirror and I wouldn't even recognize myself. I'd be like, I
Yeah.
don't see myself as the happy
Mm.
person, or the high performing, high functioning person that I am. And I think I remember going to therapy at that time and being like, I don't know what my purpose is. Like I really don't understand like why I exist. Like I just didn't see the person that I
Yeah.
used to see in myself. And I think that was the scariest thing for me, because I really did know when I started not enjoying the things that I previously enjoyed. And these are really stupid things, by the way. Shopping, I get so much excitement out of going shopping. I
Yeah.
don't know why. I've always been like that. I was a buyer in my full-time career. Like everything, whenever I go shopping, and even I'd be going shopping and nothing would even, I wouldn't,
Cheer you up.
I'd be like, why am I here? Like, this isn't good. So as soon as I started
Yeah.
recognizing the things that used to make me feel better weren't making me feel better,
Yeah.
I started to get quite worried about myself.
Yeah. So what you're describing in psych terms is called anhedonia. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, but it's the loss of interest. It's a very common, it's like one of the biggest descriptions that people like they discuss, like, yeah, like the things that I used to enjoy I no longer enjoy, like life just kind of seems like pointless, I don't understand. That term is anhedonia. um and it's very common, right? Like we lose sight of the little things that we can find gratitude and joy in, which is really, it's really hard to see when you're in like such a low space and a low mood. And right back at you. Thank you for sharing your experience. And it's funny, you said 6 months, right? So like 6 months seems to be like kind of a natural time, right? Time is not a healer, but
Resource.
time does, right? Like, because right, a lot can change in 6 months. I guess you don't realize that like a lot can change in 6 months. And so that's enough time for outside life to just be happening and to change and maybe give you the nudge that you need. Um, but I was gonna say a lot of the stuff that you like commented on with like how you weren't feeling good with yourself, the symptoms that, right, we typically see with depression, and this is like from my own personal experience, but like when you're like really stuck in the suck, um, we see a lot of things like either poor, like too much sleep or not enough sleep, or you have weight gain or you lose a lot of weight. You have anhedonia where you're losing all that interest in the things that you once like cared about. And some of those symptoms, like, and you also have can have like chronic pain and you can have like issues like that. And some of those issues are just getting older, like your body.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's hard to tell, like, am I in a depressive episode or am I just crying because I had an overwhelming hard day and I needed to cry in my car for a little autoemotive therapy, right? Like, um, but yeah, I don't know for you in terms of like when, if you have you been able to recognize with other people, because I'm sure you're a high functioning person, I'm a high functioning person. We tend to surround ourselves with people who are similar. And so high functioning people, it's really hard to see when they are stuck in a low mood or stuck in the suck, so to speak, right? To see those symptoms. I think a lot of the times we keep that stuff really close to the chest just
Mm,
because it's uncomfortable to talk about. I've been feeling uncomfortable and unhappy and really low, and it doesn't seem like anything in the world is going to make it better.
yeah.
I think it's hard to spot in other people.
I agree. And I think it presents differently in everybody as well. Because, so for example, I won't go into this in much detail, but there's a lot of my family members that have a history of depression.
Yeah,
And I think it presents differently in all of them. There's some that will literally just cry and everything is emotional. There's some that will retreat away completely and won't see anybody. There's also I used to date somebody who you could very clearly see it in the way that they were interacting in the relationship with me, in the relationship with other
yeah,
people, the way they had the relationship with themselves. I think it's difficult to identify because it presents differently in so many different people, and like you say, it could be symptoms of other things as well. But I think
hmm,
the difference is like when the the period of time that it takes to maybe see a change. And or I
yeah,
don't know, you'll know this better than me, like from a science perspective, but like from what I have seen from my personal experiences, is like if it's an ongoing persistent thing versus like a one-off maybe blip or something like that. I don't know, maybe you can share from more of like a psychology background perspective.
just in terms of like what exactly, just so I'm
Like
understanding
how
better.
you can identify if it's like a difference between like, is this low mood depression or is this just something that I'm experiencing right now? For example, why you were saying like,
Oh,
oh, it's a bit emotional today, or is this actually something that I need to be thinking about is a bit more serious?
yeah. Yeah, I guess like I to be honest, it really comes down to self-awareness and like recognize knowing yourself and knowing what like your normal function is. It's hard if you're starting from a place of typical low mood. I think just from my own experience, I had a lot of trauma growing up for very, very long time, and I was on my own at 16. So like I didn't get to develop a lot of things where it was like, because you know how you said like you like shopping, like you love shopping and you know that makes you happy and it makes you feel better. Um, for me, because I had to like grow up so fast, I don't have things that I would identify. At least, I mean, I do now, but like back then, of like what were the things that were my hobbies and the stuff that I enjoyed to then compare like, oh, am I no longer having interest in this? Or like I don't care to go and do this thing anymore. That was really hard for me to identify for myself. And so if you don't have those things, it can make it a little bit tricky. A great tool is to do mood tracking. So like just to say like on a daily basis, what is your mood and like can you identify why, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think like I think the biggest things is like if it's persistent, like you said, and there are like, true major depressive episodes come with a persistence, like a lingering, ongoing thing, and that no matter what you do and try, you can't seem to really get out of that funk. If you start to see things in like your reactions to the world. So
Yes.
I know we're two women talking about depression. For women, we tend to be more emotional in the terms of we like cry and we break down. Men, it presents more in irritability and anger. Rather than crying, it comes out as irritability and anger. But if you're seeing like frequent reactions to the outside world of like every day you're breaking down and crying, or every interaction you're being irritable and angry, then that's a sign that something is going on for like at least low grade depression. At any point, if you're thinking about hurting yourself, killing yourself, hurting others, those things are like serious signs that you definitely then want to talk to somebody, because that's our brain sabotaging ourselves. And so there's something going on with really low levels of serotonin and dopamine. Um, but yeah, it's really it's in a world where we're distracted by social media and our attention span is now like being like dwindled down to 10-second video clips and things like that. It's really about that's why mindfulness is such a huge practice. It's about paying attention in the moment, paying attention to like, how am I feeling today? And like, how is this compared to yesterday? And can I change something to actively show up different tomorrow? And if
Yeah.
you do, did it actually change anything, or are you still feeling really stuck? And it's about being mindful about that stuff. And
Yeah.
that in and of itself is hard work. And if you're
Yeah.
feeling low, it feels like the weight of the world to do something like that.
100%. And yeah, it's interesting to hear that from your perspective of like you didn't have the experience to be self-aware, and I think that that's actually true for a lot of people in that situation, and that is obviously an issue, because if you don't have that self-awareness, then it is very difficult to seek out help. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of when it comes to any mental health issue mental health issue, it's all about the awareness, like how you're going to get yourself out of that. It all stems from like becoming self-aware, and I think that is
Yeah.
what I've come to realize, one of the biggest reasons why we are in such a mental health crisis around the world, because so many people lack that self-awareness and understanding of what is
Mhm.
actually happening to them. And that's
Yeah.
that's a challenge bigger than TINAH can help with. But like obviously the more people speak about it and like can pick up on like for example, even if we're having this conversation and someone resonates with something that one of us has said, the more people can hear that and like understand more about the conversation, the more that drives self-awareness and being like something just
Right.
clicks, and somebody will understand, oh, hold on a minute, these symptoms that have been persisting for most of my life or the past 6 months or the past couple of weeks maybe aren't normal, and I should figure out what's the next steps to me understanding more about what's going on with me, and then hopefully seeking help or going on a healing journey.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that is our ultimate goal with this podcast with TINAH. And for anybody listening, just know it takes steps. It takes time. I know that sucks to hear because we say time is not a healer. And so I'm not saying time will heal it, but you do have to give yourself the grace and patience to work on the things that you need to work on.
Yeah.
Um, I realize it's funny. So when I gained some self-awareness, right? um, in gaining some self-awareness, one of my favorite things is I love TV. I love TV. I love movies. It is the probably the bane of my productivity and all of that, but I love it. But I figured out that if I would only watch TV in every spare moment that I had, where like I'd get home from work and immediately just shut down and then lay on the couch, or because I used to work a hospital job, I would have days off during the week. And instead of like going out and like going for walks or going to the park, which I do like nature, I recognize nature is very helpful for me. Um, but if I wouldn't do anything, I'd wake up, clean a little bit, and then literally lay on the couch all day and watch TV. That's when I would recognize, oh, I'm distracting too much. It's become a maladaptive, an unhealthy, unhelpful coping mechanism.
Yeah,
And and I also would find that, like, when I start to get a little more depressed, I seek out TV shows like Grey's Anatomy or things that are gonna, like, make me super emotional so that, like, I could just cry and be like, "Well, I'm
right.
crying because of the TV." Like,
Yeah, yeah,
rather than, watching things that because I just enjoy the quality of action or the acting or the storylines, the
yeah,
things like that. But yeah, it really is all about the self-awareness, and I hope our little anecdotes of what we share for what we've experienced for ourselves helps shed some light for anyone else out there. Because I think
yeah,
that's how we destigmatize things. We start talking about it.
exactly.
So,
And I think, like we say, everyone has different experiences. So just like hearing from one of our experiences might help someone see it in themselves. So that's all we
mhm,
can really hope for. We're not here to give professional advice on you personally struggling with depression or low mood, but we would like to share our own experiences to hopefully help somebody else help themselves. So
yeah,
that's kind of the purpose of us talking about it. But I guess coming out of a depressive episode, then I guess the one thing that we know is a constant in life is change, and change is the only constant in life, really. So I guess one thing we also want to reiterate in this episode is that the way that you feel today does not have to be the way that you feel forever. There is the opportunity for you to get yourself out of the place that you're in right now. So I don't know if we want to talk about
mhm,
that in a bit more detail. Like, how do we go from this place that we're in right now where we really can't see a way out of, because when you are in the deep dark depths of low mood, it is so difficult to see that you will ever feel normal if you felt a different way before, or better again.
yeah.
So how do we go about changing that? Like, what is the process?
Yeah. Well, okay, so there's 3 aspects that I probably would touch on with this. Sometimes when we're in it, there's not anything we can do other than survive.
Yeah,
Our brain and our body can't start processing things until we're out of survival mode. So sometimes we have to ride it out, but if it's becoming too difficult to ride it out, and then when I say ride it out, I don't necessarily mean alone. Like you can have the support of friends and family or a therapist or something like that. But if if it's becoming too difficult and you start leaning towards having, suicidal thoughts, stuff like that, then you definitely need a little bit more professional intervention for sure. So that's one aspect. But the other two aspects are it's a fine line, right? It's a fine line of you don't want to push yourself too hard, right? You don't want to just like ignore it and like try to, right, toxic positivity. Well, I'm just going to think about other things. Um, but it's a fine line of letting yourself sit in the suck and not get stuck. I know that's very catchy, but like, so for example, we've talked about like for the majority of the time of like getting through really heavy emotions, low moods, and even depression is sometimes you have to feel your way through it without it being dangerous. And so like we talked about crying in our cars. Sometimes you need to allow yourself to feel the emotions that you need to feel and like get them out, and doing it in your car is a great, like you're driving 20 minutes to your next location, and that is a great set time frame to allow yourself to have the emotions that you need to have. Obviously you don't want to be like sobbing and dangerous on the road, but like
yeah,
you get to your next location, you can sit in your car for 5-10 minutes and cry it out and let yourself feel what you need to feel, even though it's really uncomfortable. it's really important. That's part of like that self-awareness, right? And like letting yourself feel the negative things as much as you feel the positive things. And other ways of doing that is like, journaling where you just word vomit onto paper. Yeah, I hate everybody, I hate everything, life sucks, whatever that may be that's running through your head. Another one is like body scan, right? Where you feel where the emotions are being carried in your body. So I think it's important to like have that awareness and allow yourself to feel it, but not where it's so much that you feel like you get stuck and you can't get out of it. I don't know if that makes sense. So that's like one aspect.
Yeah, definitely. I think something that, particularly in the UK, we're trained to do is not feel our emotions and not
That's
listen to
everywhere.
others' feelings. And I mean, it's probably over, but there's definitely a culture in the UK that's like, tough up a lip, suck it up,
Yeah.
don't don't cry. Like when you're a kid and you
Yeah.
start crying, you're literally told, shut up, don't stop, don't
d-
cry, which is
Yeah.
insane. And the reason that kids, from my understanding of this, the reason that kids have tantrums, the reason that kids cry so much, and the reasons that kids overreact about everything is it's not an overreaction. That's just them getting out how they feel. And like that is, since I've been going to therapy and I've been doing various different healing exercises, that is something that I really do try to do now, because I never used to cry. Like I never ever used to cry until this period of time in my life where I was really struggling. And then ever since then, I feel like I cry a lot more and I'm way more emotional because I allow myself to be. I think before I was like trained to not allow myself to have these emotions. And ever since then I've started to release them. I can just feel so much like anxiety and built up trauma, if that's the right word, I don't know, built up
Tension.
trauma, emotion, tension, just releasing,
Yeah.
because you are processing things as they happen. You're not storing things. So for example, if like I don't know, experienced something last week that really upset me and I just quickly moved over it and didn't even take time to process it, probably a week later I'm still thinking about it. Whereas
Yeah.
if you allow yourself to sit and feel the emotion, release the emotion, actually allows you to get over it much quicker and release it way quicker.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think we're taught to associate being emotional as a bad thing. Right. And there's a whole nother connotation, like women are emotional versus men. Men are emotional in their own different ways, right? Like I said, anger, irritability, that sort of thing. But I think, and right, as children, we might cry more because we don't have the words, we don't have the knowledge to be able to like fully process and express what we're feeling in our body. But again, as we get older, none of us have been taught how to actually do that. And that's why we hear things on social media like journaling and certain like cognitive reframing prompts, and why body movement is so good, and mindfulness meditation and breath work, like why all these things, cold showers or, cold water on your face, all these things are exploding on social media because these are all tools to help us process our emotions, both mentally and physically.
Yeah.
And so I think you touched on it really well. And if we're like, once, we allow ourselves to process that a little bit, how to continue to move through the difficult experience, but without focusing on the emotions themselves, it's usually all about like regrounding and refocusing in the present moment. Um, I'm sure we've all heard this, that like anxiety is where we're stuck thinking and worrying about the future, and depression is where we're stuck worrying about the past. In the present is a in the something, it's from Kung Fu Panda. It's a quote that I'm butchering right now. It's a really cute quote. Maybe we'll use that for our social media this week, for Kung Fu Panda. But the whole point of that's why people talk about trying to be present in the moment is like, okay, so how can I focus on taking care of myself right now? Can't change the past, I can't predict the future. So what can I do to allow myself to feel a little bit better in my body and mind? right, it comes back to journaling, but maybe you're not focusing on the negative emotions, you're focusing on other things. You're doing really light exercise, you're doing the breathing and meditation, but without focusing on the negative emotions, getting out in nature. And I know a lot of us shut down when we're really low, so we don't want to socialize, but at least reaching out to your one or two core people if you can. Um, and something as simple as like, all right, what did I accomplish today? And what are my goals tomorrow? Like what are the two things I want to do tomorrow? And seeing how you can lay that out for yourself can make a really big difference as long as you're just taking it like one step at a time.
I think that's the key, isn't it? Taking it one step at a time. And it's, for me personally, I found that whole the 6 months that I really was in a suck, like
Yeah.
I was so frustrated because I knew that that wasn't me. And whenever I go through like periods of like extreme anxiety or like start to experience low mood, I get so annoyed at myself because I'm not able to pull myself out of it immediately. But it really does just take patience. And I don't want to say that time's going to heal you, because time is not the healer here. It's the things that you're going to
Yeah.
do with the time. The time is the resource that you've got, and then it's how you utilize that time that's what's going to pull you out of
Right.
it. But it is, as somebody who is quite a high functioning person, but I do struggle with anxiety and I do sometimes struggle with my mood, that for me is the hardest part, is
Yeah.
waiting for the change. And I could be doing all of the things. I could be doing the journaling, I could be doing the meditations, I can be sitting and feeling my emotions, but I still find it so frustrating. And one thing for me that really has been a change, a big change in my life, is sitting in the present moment. Because from all the therapy that I've done, that's what I've realised for a very long time I was not doing. I was constantly thinking ahead and constantly looking behind. And the thing is, we
Yeah.
can't change the past and we can't predict the future. So all we really have is the current moment in time that we're living in. And that is the
Yeah.
bit that we need to be absorbing as we go through life, and living more presently and making decisions in the present moment, rather than like, obviously, yeah, think about your future self for sure, but with as an afterthought of like what's going to help you in this moment right now. And I think that that's the hardest part about healing or going on a mental health journey, because when you go back to that present moment, all you want is to feel better, so you're still thinking about the future, and it's
Yeah.
so hard to just sit there and wait for
Yeah.
something to change. But I think everybody could, if you are feeling like that and you are taking all the steps, you're going in the right direction. So you have to hold on to that thought that, okay, I am taking baby steps, one step at a time, to
Yeah.
actually make myself, my future self, that person that you have been worrying so much about, and the scenarios that
Yeah.
they're going to go through, better.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think you're spot on with that. And I think the only thing I would add from my personal experience, right? Because a lot of the time when I find myself slipping into a depression, I lose all of the habits that have been like, right? It's the habits are there to protect me against going really deep into a depression or my anxiety getting out of control. But sometimes my biological makeup takes over. Something happens out of my control. My parent dies, right? Like, and it hits you like a train, and there's nothing that your habits can't stop it. So what I've done is like I've allowed myself the time to be low and like lay in bed and cry and do absolutely fuck all. Pardon my French. Um, but when I start getting that feeling of like, "Ugh, I'm just tired of feeling this way, and like, when am I going to feel better?" I think about, okay, I know logically the things that can help me, but it feels like too much to do right now. So I know, like, right now, if I'm feeling really, really low, moving my body would be really, really helpful. But the idea of going to a yoga class or doing a full exercise just seems like too much. It's like, okay, can I go outside and just walk around for 10 minutes and get some sunshine? Maybe it's I'm taking the dogs outside and I'm standing out in the sun with them outside, because they definitely have to, which is why having animals like dogs can be really, really helpful for depression, aside from other factors about having them. Um, but like I try to like break it down into really small, digestible, like I don't want to do this, but I know going outside for 5, 10 minutes and walking around will really help me. I'll start there. And then I usually end up going for like a longer walk because it's like, oh, this actually feels really nice to be out and about. And so I'm just going to walk a little bit longer. Um, what can I do to like change, right? Because change is the only constant in life, and it's the thing that will help us get unstuck from where we are to change how I'm feeling stuck. So if I'm glued to the couch and watching TV, it's like, you know what? I'm just going to go and take a shower. I'm going to put on some music that I really like, and I'm just going to do that. And I can stay in the shower however long I want. And it's about just trying to pivot in my behavior little by little. Um, and something that we used to do for patients on the unit is when you're in these really heavy, dark moments, it can be really hard to think about what it is that does work for you and what feels good. And so we often would have patients create a safety plan that they take home with them once they were like being discharged from the hospital. And the safety plan includes things like these are the things that I enjoy or that I can do in very small amounts that would help me kind of change my thoughts. These are my top 3 people that I can call when I'm having a really hard time. Right. And then these are additional professional resources that I can reach out to if I need it. And so they had this, and we suggested them to put it on their fridge so that like it's there. And if they're in a really low, dark moment, it's like visible in your face. And you can be like, oh shit, these are the things that will help me. Maybe I'll go for a walk for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just it's probably not the answer people were are looking for and how to get unstuck from the crappy moments. But I don't know, I find comfort. So I actually have a tattoo. Um, it's covered right now with my stuff, but it's this I made this based on the statement, change is the only constant in life. And the full thing that where this comes from, because we pulled this from some of my content, is that change is the only thing that's constant in life. You have to remain strong, keep moving forward, and try to find balance in it all. And that's what all the different shapes, because I've got like different circles and shapes and triangles within this, than the arrow in the water. And that's what I designed that tattoo off of, that idea, because my life has not been easy, and most people's lives are not easy, and it doesn't get any easier. And so finding how you can remain strong and keep pushing forward and find those little moments that you can appreciate is one of the things that we can do for ourselves when we're struggling. And so when we're struggling and when we're not, it's important.
100%. And I think the way that you learn how to handle change is sometimes going through these periods as well, and
Yeah.
understanding, because when you've gone through something once, obviously like you've mentioned, you've gone through this a few times now, you, although you don't want to be, you obviously don't want to keep going through that, but at least next time, if a next time arises, you've experienced the whole cycle, you've seen how much can change in such a short period of time, you've got the coping mechanisms. So sometimes, although yeah, it sucks to be in that position, you are building resilience to change and building programming in your head to say, this doesn't have to be this way, because you are seeing, eventually you will see that you come
Yeah.
through a whole pattern, a whole cycle, and you've
Yeah.
survived the change, you've gone through the change, you've seen how change
Yeah.
can positively impact your life, although it was a bit painful to go through at the time, or very painful to go through at the time, you've come out of it the other side. And I think the more that we can train our brains to accept change and see it as a positive thing, the easier it is to navigate life, because I think a lot of people hold resistance to change. I know that I did all
Yeah.
through my early 20s and my teenage years. I
Yeah.
hated change, like hated change.
Yeah.
Now I would say my life changes every day.
You're on the fly, girl. You're moving around. You're in a new
Yeah.
country today compared to yesterday.
It's literally true, and I've never in my life been as at peace as I have
Yeah.
been since I've really did start to accept the present time, the present moment, and change. So from my side, if there was any advice that I could give anyone, it's to really start looking at all of the experiences you've had in your life, and seeing how you've overcome them and how it's still been okay and you've got over them, and then you see the pattern of, yes, it felt terrible at the moment, but you came out of something the other side, and look at all of the examples you've had of that. Because I think when you're in that scenario where you really are in your deep suck, you can't see that in that moment. So having examples of that, so going back to your what did you call it, like the
safety plan,
having those examples in as part of that safety plan, I think is a really good reference, because you can change your thought patterns to be like, I'm strong enough to do this, I've done this before, I've got myself out of this before, and look, and this is where I'm at now. And like you can really start learning even from your own changed behaviors, I think.
At the end of the day, the suck still sucks,
Totally.
but we can recognize that it's not going to last forever. There are things to help, whether it's with your own, coping stuff that you work on, or you get outside support. But it won't last forever, because change is the only constant in life, and we can't be we can't be stuck in the dark place forever.
Exactly. I'm sure we'll do other episodes on this topic at some point. But for now, thank you for listening to today's episode. If this resonated with you, be sure to give us a like, and we would love to hear your feedback in the comments about what topics you'd like to hear more about. Don't forget to subscribe, follow us on socials, and join the community at timesnotahealer.com. All the details can be found in the episode description below. And remember, you hold the power to heal. And until next time, you've got this.